Hey, my name is Steve Moreland, and you know me as the Director of Business Development at Success Publishing. What you probably don't know is a lot about my history per se, or the other type of performance training I do as an expert working with individuals in extremely high risk environments and how I help them not just survive those environments, but move through and learn to thrive in them. So, one of the things I want to give you is for the next 20 minutes or so, a quick but focused discussion on what I call the seed of greatness. And this goes back because I've probably should have been a university professor in the study of philosophy, because understanding what philosophy is, it is how we think about our thinking, okay? And so when you really break into that and you understand, well, what are we talking about here? Philosophy from the Greek is actually two words put together. It's philo and Sophie. And philo means love, the love, and Sophie means wisdom. So philosophy put together is the love of wisdom. So in thinking about how we think, we can actually learn how we think incorrectly and where we make our errors in our judgment, and then how over time from those bad actions or outcomes that come from improperly formatted thinking, then by analyzing this, then we can learn to be better. And sometimes that takes us 10, 20, sometimes 40 years to finally get to thinking better than we're doing now. So we have a choice. We have an option. If you want to go the long way that takes you 30 or 40 years to learn how to think better, to get better outcomes, the problem with that is a lot of times you're out of time. You know, we're only living an average of 73 years old. I know we're talking about jumping over, what do you call it, centenarian, or living to be over 100 here very soon. But right now, that's just still where we're at, about 75 years, so 3/4 of a century is where we're looking at. So we're running out of time if we're taking 40 years to learn how to think better. So what's a better choice that we have? Well, this is something that I've done my entire life, as I've always loved reading and studying how our greatest minds in history were dealing and grappling with the same type of issues that we have today, except they've already dealt with them hundreds and in some cases thousands and thousands of years ago. So the seed of greatness that I want to give you here is probably one of the most powerful quotes, statements, or learning. It actually was the mantra that was actually taught by one of our fathers of Greek philosophy, certainly not the only individual that has had great impacts on us from a philosophical standpoint throughout history. But Socrates is known as the father of Greek philosophy, and he's had a lot of impact on how we think today and how we've learned to think. And he didn't write anything down, as you might know. He simply told stories and worked with his students in kind of a roundabout area. And what he did over the time is he transferred his ideas through a thing called the Socratic method of asking questions, playing devil's advocate, and then working through the scenario to help the person learn how to catch their thinking process, how to catch the errors in their thinking process, or how to catch the hitches of how biases and prejudices affect us. And that's what I want to give you here today. So he handed out this great training to one of his key and most notable students, Plato. And then through time, Plato, of course, was the teacher for Aristotle. And everyone knows how Aristotle has impacted us as well. So these three great minds carried along this mantra, and it was called "Be as you wish to seem." So how is this a seed of greatness, and what can it mean for you? Well, if you understand what this did in just one person's life, you can understand how to take this thinking process and how to use it to impact and affect exactly what you're doing right now so that you can move to the next level. You can move past the thinking blocks or the thinking it's not disbeliefs, it's actually errors in your thinking process, because you're in a level of it's not disbelief, it's just a ceiling. You have a glass ceiling, and it's your thinking process that is causing the error. So what I want to do is show you how to move through that and how to break that glass ceiling and how to move not just to the next level but all the way into the stratosphere. And the reason why that is when I share this information, most of the individuals that are listening to it are usually those individuals that are the right types of people. People that are interested in studying their own thinking process, to think about how they're thinking so they can get better, are in the process of trying to improve and develop themselves. And they do that because there's something inside of them that wants their life to move to a position of significance. They want what they do and why they do it to actually matter. So they are looking for an opportunity that they can impact one person's life, 10 people's lives, 100 people's lives, and preferably thousands of people's lives. Because if you get something and it becomes your aha, your epiphany, the light bulb pops on, then when you share that with other individuals, very possibly they're going to have the same level of breakthrough. That's the word I was looking at, breaking through your glass ceiling. And when that breakthrough happens, then the sky's the limit, okay? So let's talk about this and how this affected one person's life. And more importantly, what does it mean to you? So outside of doing my high-risk performance consulting, I actually built my own performance system called Rubicon. And Rubicon is a iteration, an evolution of a number of different training systems, as I've been studying philosophy since I think I was about 15 years old. So I was a little bit of that nerd, geek, weirdo, whatever you want to call it, but it was just something that's so I don't know, it just captured my imagination to think about how these other people were thinking and to see that they were dealing with the same types of problems we're having today. So what the realization is there's two ways you can look at this, okay? Be as you wish to seem. When I've taught many of my students before, I said, what does this mean to you? What does this make you feel like when you hear this? And I've had a fair amount of individuals go one of two ways, okay? One of them is, you know what? Be as you wish to seem sounds like you are trying to put on an appearance, that you are faking it until you make it, okay? And a lot of people, you know, is that a bad thing? Well, you might say, well, it's not really genuine. It doesn't really make you feel authentic. So it feels somehow to an extent that you are being less than genuine. And that means, you know, are you doing something that feels unethical, okay? And I know you may have done this as well, but when I first got into business and I was young, I didn't have any of this gray hair yet. I looked like I was 16, and yet I was working for, you know, Fortune 500 company, dealing with large law firms downtown Dallas, and dealing with, you know, doctors making $1 million a year, and I was making technical advice to them from a taxation standpoint, from risk management standpoint. And it was important for me to look successful and older than I was, because a lot of them would look at me and say, hey son, you know, where did you graduate from school at? And so I actually went out, now that I wear glasses, back then I actually went out and bought me a pair of Polo tortoise shell glasses that was in back in 1989, 1990, and they had no prescription. So I actually just bought a pair of blank glasses. I went out and bought the most expensive 2 suits that I could possibly buy, the most expensive briefcase. And what was I doing in the process of this? I was working on playing a role in a script that I was working for a major company that did risk management, and I'm dealing with people that make a lot of money. We're trying to protect their income, protect their future. And so I need to look like I'm what? I'm older than I am, that I'm smarter than I am, that I'm more experienced than I am, because I look so young at the time. All this was blonde back then. So I wore the glasses to make me look more intellectual. I had the expensive briefcase, the whatever Bruno Magli, I think was the expensive Italian loafers I was wearing. So I was really trying to play a role. So that was a little bit, in fact, maybe a lot of the fake it till you make it, right? So now, where I'm at now, I mean, the gray is here, the glasses are, you know, Under Armour, not Polo, but they are now needed, not fake anymore. And the way I am now is I know that I know what I'm doing. So, you know, I give you my risk management advice. I tell you how to exceed situations, not just survive them, how to thrive in Hell's Kitchen. And at the end of the day, because I have that confidence now that I didn't have then, I don't need to fake it, because I don't really care whether you listen to me or not. I know what I know, and I know the individuals that have followed me achieve the level of success. So that changes, you know, the fact that we don't have to do that. But a lot of times when you're going back to the start and someone that's building a career, building a new business environment, that is the way that they're at. So this is the idea that a lot of people say, you know, it doesn't make me feel right. So is there the other group of individuals that thinks about this differently and maybe, to me, more ethically correct? And that is, they say that this is about rehearsing who you are in the process of becoming. And I like that one better, because the rehearsing idea kind of falls into the role or into the vernacular of being on stage, okay, and being part of a play. And as I was thinking about that over time, when I've taught the Rubicon system, years ago, there's something very important, a very big understanding that you might have gotten in life, but I want to share it with you, okay? And that is that we don't get to choose the fact that we are thrown into this play called reality, and it's held in this grand theater called life. And once upon a time, in my case, almost 52 years ago, I got tossed right into this. I didn't get to choose my parents. I didn't get to choose what country I was going to land in. I didn't choose what language I was going to be taught. All those things were kind of done to me. And what I did get to choose down the road is things that people are not aware of. And that is, even though you're in the play called reality, in the theater called life, you have to realize that you have an opportunity when you're inside this platform. You have the opportunity to choose your script, okay? Most people don't know that. They don't know. They come up being taught by well-meaning parents, by instructors, by teachers, by professors, by ministers, by priests, and other good peers that, hey, this is who you are. And they give them a script and they tell them this is the role that you're supposed to play. And you end up playing out somebody else's script that has been given to you because you adopted it unaware. So what happens to a few of us that move through a position of enlightenment, you might call it, or just sheer frustration with not being satisfied or not feeling significant with playing somebody else's part, you finally sit there and go, wait a second, I don't understand why I'm having to play this script. In fact, I don't like this script. And you're saying, well, what does the script mean, Steve? What are you meaning by that? What are you trying to use as a metaphor or an analogy here? And the script is basically the preferences and even the morals and ethics that we have been taught from the script standpoint that this is truth. And you have to do this, you have to play this role, you have to act this way, you have to use this type of vocabulary, you have to believe these certain things, and these are not opinions, they're truth, they're fact. And they tell you that in a concrete fashion. And so then what I did, and this is a lot of other individuals have done this, we start paying attention in a different way. We start asking questions. And we start looking for this level of significance and satisfaction because we feel that there should be something more than this, JOB, where we live this role and we die a life that is unsatisfying and unfulfilled and doesn't feel like it has the significance that matters, that we have the ability to leave a legacy that's something more than average, ordinary, and mediocrity. So what we start doing is we use the value of time, and some of us start paying attention to what mom and dad might have told us when we were little, and we've now watched them for decades afterwards. We might watch the way they believed, how they treated other people. Were they prejudiced? Were they bigots? What is their religion? How did all these things? Was their economic ideas? How did they deal with finances? How did they deal with other people in the world? What did they believe about their work? What did they believe about their nationality? What did they believe about? And these are all preferences, okay? But yet they were given to us and treated as if they were, truth that had to be, believed and done and followed, and there was no opportunity to think otherwise. And the thing is when you use the value of time over decades, guess what you get to see if you're paying attention, if you become aware? And that is you see the result. You see the outcome playing out over time. And what I started seeing, the reason why I went into finance when I was, my early 20s, is because I saw other people, not just my parents, not handling their finances and their economics properly. Their investment habits, their spending habits, their budgeting, their planning process, control and thinking about the future and how what you do today impacts the future in a very irreversible way. So that caused me to go into that area, even though I was raised or reared, I think is the right term, my grammar teacher told me, even though I was reared to actually go into the Marine Corps to be a Marine by my father that was Marine Recon, I took a different path and I wanted to be a difference. And going into that finance, what I found is their system didn't work. So I had to go, what system does work? And by asking those correct questions, I started opening doors, reading textbooks, going to college, and doing all those other things that curious individuals do because they wish to play a different script in a different role. I didn't want to be the role that gets to the end of life and nothing was there. So I thought, well, I better figure this thing out sooner rather than later because their outcome is terrible. So I'm responsible for me. I have to do a different role and script so that my outcome is what? Better. And when you have that type of thinking process, what happens is each one of us starts taking our own levels of roles and scripts and aiming at becoming better than we are now, better than our predecessors, better than the people are that told us we had to adopt their level of thinking. So what happens is the play inside of this grand theater actually can become better than it currently is by each one of us striving to do that a little bit better towards that ultimate, which is where we end at the end of life, and that is our best. We want to get to that best version of ourselves, and that then becomes the legacy that we then hand to the next generation, or maybe even to our 2 generations down. Why? Because what we have proven has produced an outcome that was an outlier, that was a marked difference above average, that was not ordinary, but in fact extraordinary. Okay, so how do you get those 5 little extra letters there to become extra and extraordinary? Is you have to decide that the script that you were given, the role that you were told you had to play, may not in fact be the best thing. So the whole thing that this was designed here, Be What You Wish to Seem, is really that rehearsal. And the rehearsal process of who is it that you need to be in order to make that legacy, to make that outcome become something that is worthy, something that is full of meaning, we call meaningful, that you can leave behind, that makes the world a better place because you chose to be constantly and ever improving. The Japanese call that kaizen, which is the continuous level of improvement toward the best you can possibly be. And that process, what you end up doing is you end up inspiring, you end up motivating because you're constantly moving, you're constantly resisting the status quo. The status quo is that thing that just says, hey, everything's got to be all right, just sit down, find you a comfortable place on the couch and watch that average of 8 hours a day of television and social media, and you know what? It's going to be okay. In fact, it's not okay, and you know better than that. So what do? In order to change that, you've got to find something, a better pattern. You've got to go find it in books. You've got to go find it in education. You've got to go find the individuals that sometimes have left their scripts and their roles behind in the form of books, manuscripts, now video. And you can go find that on YouTube. That's my favorite place to go because I can basically search for anything and instantly I'm going to find clips of ideas, ideals, and individuals that are accomplishing things as simple as what my son, for instance, told me once upon a time. I kept asking him because he was very, very bright in technology. And so I would constantly ask him, like you probably do for your young ones as well, as I'm having a problem with my phone. How do I fix this? What do I do? What button do I press? Here, just reconfigure this for me. And after he was getting up into college, he finally said, look, you got to stop doing this. I'm busy. And I'm like, wait a second here. Okay, I'm the dad. I'm asking you for a little payback for what I've done for you. Help me out here. And he said, look, you need to learn, Dad, how to ask Google better questions. And I said, wait a second. No, I don't want to have to go do that. I just want to come to you. You already know it, or you know how to go find it faster than me. And he said, no, this is how it's going to happen. And he actually hung up on me. And I was very frustrated at the time. And I remember, I brought you into this world. I'm going to take you out of this world. And as I sit there and thought about it, I said, he's actually teaching me a better habit pattern, okay? The better habit pattern is exactly what he does, because when I ask him a question, if he doesn't know it, he runs to Google, right? Google's this great source of information, all things out there. So the key thing is the better way that you ask the question to Google, it helps Google narrow down the search results so you get right to what you're looking for sooner rather than later. And that is, in fact, a very key subject or a key concept is, Tony Robbins told me this, I think it's 30-something years ago, is your quality of life is in direct proportion to the quality of questions you continually ask yourself. Your quality of life is in direct proportion to the quality of questions you continually ask, okay? So what he's basically saying is when you learn how to ask better questions, when you learn how to question your role and your script and do it in a better way, guess what? You get better responses. You get better answers. I'm like, oh, wow. It's so great to have our millennials teaching us older group about getting to this next level. But this is what causes that resistance. We don't want to do that, and there's a reason for that, and that is that we are looking for this thing called acceptance, okay? And if you go back to your psychology training, back in college, maybe 201 class, remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And at the base of the pyramid, what you had was safety and security. So basically what Maslow postulated is that the most important things we do from a primal standpoint is we seek out things that provide us safety and things that provide us security. Down the road, once we have those taken care of, then we move up the chain with regards to society and our individual needs. But we don't go after luxuries, we don't go after extras until we have those two fundamental, maybe even cornerstone pieces secured. And then Virginia Satir, a really well-known therapist, came along years later after, I would say, thousands of patients that she had gone through in her career. And she said, you know what, Maslow, I disagree with you. I think there's one other thing that is more important, that is the underpinning below even safety and security that trumps those. And that is this thing called acceptance. And the acceptance is about our tribal and primal idea that we have to be in a group in order to survive. And that goes back to Neanderthal or Homo erectus prior to Homo sapiens, is we understood that there was a very dangerous world out here. And if we didn't work together in a group, in a tribe, then out there hanging out by ourselves doing our own thing was probably not going to last very long, because we were going to end up being lunch for a saber-tooth. So what we did is we had this primal need to be adopted, to be accepted by the group. And this thing today is still called peer pressure, right? You know how you got up in, it started in grade school, went into junior high, got worse in high school. And then we think somehow when we graduated from high school that peer pressure disappeared, and it hasn't. And that is a lot of times what causes us that original thing called the fake it till you make it deal, is we are still in that great need and desire, the core of our soul, to be invited to that end of the lunch table, to be invited out with those group of individuals to go to the bar or go to the ball game or just to hang out and have time together. All those things are what we crave inside. So what happens is we end up violating even safety and security, and we act very foolish, and that is the reason underneath it. It's actually very primal. So what I'm talking, why I'm giving this to you, is when you understand that we're all in this, stuck in this script and role environment, in this great play, right, called reality, when you finally get this awareness of, oh, that's why I act foolish sometimes, then you stop getting mad at other people. And you realize that the problem, or the thing that you can directly affect, is how you are reacting in a primal way. And when you get smart about the reacting, then you stop reacting, right? Because that's what happens with our amygdala and our reptilian or crocodile brain, we call it, the very core center of top of the brainstem. That causes us to fight or flight. That's why we flee most of the time when we see something bad happen. And then other times we lose our temper too quick and we want to fight. Because someone embarrassed us or someone challenged our ego or whatever. And what happens is those of us that evolve, we stop reacting and start responding. Those are not synonymous. They're actually different actions. And the response actually comes from the front of the brain called the neocortex. And this is where we use reason and judgment. And where does good judgment come from? Well, it comes from experience. And where does experience come from? Bad judgment, okay? That is the part where we did face plants, where we fell down again and again and made mistakes and did the wrong thing and maybe ran like a coward once upon a time, and then we thought about it and said, wait a second, I don't like that. That's not the right thing to do. It's not how I want to be known. It's how I want to be as you wish to see me. I'm not going to be known as a coward. I'm going to be the individual who stands up and has morals and ethics and preferences. And I am going to hold those, and this is going to be what? My identity, okay? So these are the key things that we're talking about. Be as you wish to seem. It is a rehearsing of the identity that you get to choose. Your identity is your script, the role that you are playing in this play on a stage called reality, Okay, so now the question is what was this so valuable and how did it affect this young man? So if we go back to 356 BC, there was a young man born in Pella, Macedonia. His father was King Philip II of Macedonia, and a lot of things were going on in the Greek city-states at this time. Obviously, Socrates had already passed. Plato was passing at the time. So Aristotle, it was Alexander, his 13 years old. The king sends down to Athens and says, hey, I want to hire you, Aristotle. You're the most noted philosopher, the guy in all of Greece that is the smartest guy we have about learning to think about our thinking. We want you to come teach philosophy to the prince, at what would you call it? At the it's not the castle, but wherever it is that where the throne is at. Come up here and teach young Alexander, and he did, this for only 1 year. And the mantra that Aristotle handed, among other things, to this very young prince was what Plato had taught him that he had received and been passed down from Socrates, and it was be as you wish to seem. So this is the key, what I call the seed of greatness. Because what this actually does is it actually reflects that you get to choose not only your role, not only your script, but you choose what is more around the template or the macro paradigm of how you want to see yourself and how you want other people to see you. And you get to choose between one of these two. Same number of letters, but entirely different outcome. So see, a lot of times when fate brings us, difficulties in life, what happens is a lot of people immediately cringe, go into the fetal position, they do the flee, they have the fear, and they totally do the wrong thing, okay, which is mostly either no action or run away from the right action. And a lot of that is due either to lack of education or lack of training around them because they don't know how to function better, because this does not happen automatically. This is our standard default of how we act from that primal area of us is the flee, run away from danger, run away from things that make our heart do like this, run away from things where people might laugh at us or call us a name, or guess what, not invite us to come back and hang out with them in the group and be accepted. So any of that stuff that risks that, I'm not going to do it because that makes me an outlier. It makes me someone that steps outside of the crowd, and if I step outside of the crowd, I might die. And I know you think that's funny, and I'm being slightly facetious, but only slightly, because at the end of the day, think about it. When you step up in front of a group of people, what happens to you? Do you start sweating? Do your palms get sweaty? Do you start perspiring? Okay. Do you start actually hyperventilating, and then you start forgetting your notes, and then you're like, oh my God, what if I get out there and I stutter? What happens if I get out there and I forget something, or I say the wrong thing, or it just doesn't come off well? What are those people going to think about me? Okay. And that causes, I think it's 99 out of 100 people to be more frightened of public speaking than they are of death. They would rather just die than have to get in front of a group of people. And it goes all the way back to that very primal thing about being accepted, okay? And being an outcast, okay? But here's the deal. If you're going to be that individual that becomes the victor, you have to take different types of risk. You have to be willing to be alone. You have to be willing to step outside of the group. Why? Because the group that's playing the play, that has been handed the script and the role from mommy and daddy, and the unsuccessful professor that's making $25,000 a year forever, wearing the worn out tweed jacket because he can't afford anything else, because he's not doing anything except saying the same thing over and over every day in his sleep, okay? So he's not really impacting and changes any people's lives. So his economic status reflects how many people's lives he's affecting, which is almost zero. So how are you going to end up being that individual that enjoys a different economic status because you want to take your learning, your training, your awareness that has come from you getting kicked in the head by a horse like I have, doing the face plant, but having that grit and determination inside of you to get back up and dust yourself off and decide, you know what, maybe I'm bloody, but you know what I get? I get the t-shirt. Every time I get knocked down, I get another t-shirt. And you know what happens? I get more rank on my sleeve. And sometimes if I do it and I'm really valiant and I hold my mud, I hold the line, and I stay true to what is truly moral and ethical, guess what? I might get some medals up here, okay? It's not to brag, okay? Not to say, you know, I'm Chesty Puller, Commandant of the Marine Corps. He was called Chesty because he had no more chest to hold all of his medals, right? It's not so much about the bragging, it's about what we can achieve as human beings. See, when we see someone else break the 4-minute mile, what does that do psychologically? Because right after that, before that, they said it's not feasible. Human beings, as our structure and everything, we can't move that fast, okay? And then some person said, I don't believe that. That is not fact. That is opinion, and therefore I choose to have my own opinion different from yours. And they ran past 4 miles, and then a bunch of other people said, oh, wait a second. If that human can do it, why can't I? Bingo, better question. Remember what Tony Robbins taught? The quality of life directly affects the quality of the answers you get, the outcomes. So all of a sudden, right after the first person broke the 4-minute limiting belief, all of a sudden, boom, 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 a bunch of other people ran past it and also did the same thing. So that's the same thing that you can do, and it's the same thing that you can be the first one that crosses that barrier. The first one that says, hey, what you're calling truth is in fact just your opinion and maybe well-meaning, okay? So you're being courteous and cordial, but you're saying, I choose that I'm going to have a different role. I'm going to read a different script. And you know, in fact, I'm actually going to write my script and live my life. And that is why I love this mantra, this creed right here, is live the story that you want to tell, okay? Not the one that mommy and daddy wanted you to do, not the one that other people are peer pressuring you into, forcing you into a box, about what is it that you really want to do and how do you want to be remembered on a stone one day. Is it ordinary, average, forgettable and irrelevant? Or would it rather be something that this individual made a difference and changed this number of lives, impacted this cause, caused this movement to occur, and from that there is a ripple effect? That is the kind of thing that I think the sacred has us here for, in order to test us through the most difficult situations and to find out, in fact, what we truly have and who we can be. So this whole thing of rehearsing to be and play the role that you want to be is about that decision of, do you want life to matter? Do you want to look back at the very end and to be satisfied that the significance that you have caused has mattered and has become meaningful, and that you have in fact lived a life that is worthy? So let's talk about what happened when Aristotle spent a year talking to this young boy. Right after that, this young Alexander was a kind of a rebel in the palace. About a year after that, he ended up one day being out at the stables, and his father, the king, was out there with a number of other individuals, and they were very big about horses. It was one of the first city-states or countries that really started using a cavalry inside of their military operations. Prior to that, it was just foot soldiers, and that was it. Everybody got into a phalanx, took the shield, got out the dory and pulled out the xiphos, and that's how everybody fought. So what this happened differently is they started using horses inside battle to move quickly, to do flanking maneuvers, to get around behind the enemy, and to find their weak points. Okay, so it was very important, the quality of the horses, and they had this really oversized black charger, and his name was Bucofalus. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Bucofalus was good for anybody. He was a rebel horse as well. He couldn't, the trainers wouldn't put up with him, and they told the king, they said, look, we just need to get rid of this one. We can't make him do anything right. And there was Alexander out there that day, and this was the beginning position that he had of starting to do things boldly and do things different, do things outside of everyone else's acceptance. And he went out, took the risk, went up to this oversized charger, as him is still 14 years old, and he connected with his horse. In fact, he jumped up on the back of the horse and took off across the field, and everybody thought, oh my God, he's going to kill the prince. And in fact, he didn't. They became like the boy and his dog. So they were inseparable, and it became his battle charger. And in fact, as you go through the study of Alexander, you'll find that all the way through the Hydaspes River into India, Alexander took Bucofalus into every single battle with him, and this horse lived every day to go into that battle line. And there's a reason for that, I'll tell you in a second. So what happened, the next thing is after he got Bucofalus, he's training with the companion cavalry. He shows up with his father on this great plain to fight some of the other warring Greek city-states. And his father has the center. He has Parmenion, which was his general, on the right flank. And he gave his 18-year-old son, and it might even been 16, puts him on his left flank. And as they're talking about this through the books I've studied about it, there is that question that they had of, King Philip, what are you doing? Not only are you putting a young boy that's not battle tested in charge of your left flank, but you are also putting him in charge of the companion cavalry. And guess who you lined him up in front of? You lined him up against the Sacred 300, which from Thebes, these 300 soldiers were the best warriors. You might call them the Force Recon, the Super Rangers, the Navy SEALs. They were team 6. They were super guys that everybody was afraid of. And they said, you're putting your son up against the guys that are the best killers in all of Greece. What are you doing? And the response came back from, well, first of all, I'm testing him to see if he can control his fear, because he knows who I'll put him up against. Number one. Number two is, how is he going to perform against the best of the best? Because I don't want someone taking over my position as king of Macedonia, as a Macedon, at a point in the future if he's a coward and if he's no good on his horse and in battle. Don't want him here. I'd rather him die now. And some people go, whoa, man, that's really brutal. But think about this. It's the same way that fate tests us, the way God, if you will, tests us when she decides to see what we're really made of. She brings the worst situations. She actually brings hell on earth to us here. And if you've been through your desert experience in life, or I call it my bloodstained hurricane, when you lost everything, everyone, and there was no one there for you, and you were down in the well by yourself, out in the dark by yourself, how you perform in those worst situations is in fact the only test of character. And you say, well, wait a second, Steve, that's not true. I don't think that. How someone acts every day is a test of their character. And the answer is no, it's not. Because see, when everything is peachy and there's plenty of money and the job is great and everything's going on with all the relationships right and your health is there and you're fit and all the food that you want is there and everything is perfect, how you act at that point has no determination on what your true character is, because it's easy to do right when there's no resistance, okay? When everything turns upside down and the money's not there, the relationships are broken, people betray you, people do stupid things, life brings challenges, and sometimes not one at a time, sometimes 2 and 3 at a time, all at the same time. How you perform them is the determining factor that then in fact grades what they called in Old English as your mettle, M-E-T-T-L-E. And the test of your mettle, the test of who you are inside. The Marine Corps says character is what you do in the dark when no one is watching, okay? So that is what we're really talking about here, is that's when you get to actually see who someone is. It's what King Philip wanted to see in his son, how he was going to act in his worst nightmare. Guess what happened? He actually had practiced and planned and prepared at such a level that his performance on the battlefield created a special type of formation called a flying dragon tooth. And it had never been seen before, and with his foot soldiers timed with his companion cavalry, he broke through the battle line at the actual Sacred 300, rolled around behind them, cut them off, surrounded them, killed most of them, and then in an honorable fashion took the few that survived the actual slaughter of the battle, handed them back their weapons, and in an honorable fashion sent them back home to be able to live their life, but also to tell the story of Alexander. So this is the kind of individual that started out by another 2 years. His father had been assassinated. He took over the throne at age 20. The other Greek city-states that had been under King Philip's rule decided to revolt and said, "Oh, we're not going to put up with this new prince just because he's the king. We're gonna break off and do our own thing." So the following year, he had to fight a number of key battles, and he acted with such swift and incredible levels of force, showing up on people's doorsteps with his hoplite group of what was once upon a time just a bunch of sheep and goat farmers up in the hills of Macedonia. These had now become hoplite warriors through his father and now under his command. And his command continued to impress everyone there with his honor, with his opportunity to surrender and fall back under my rule. Or if you fight, then the consequences are going to be severe. And they were. You can read those in the journals. After that, if he took back over and became basically king or emperor of all Greece, it was now age 21. He had decided that, these guys over in Persia have been sitting here invading us Greeks for the last, I think, about 30, 40 years. And it started at Marathon, and then it happened again when Xerxes brought across his massive force, and actually right there in the Macedonia area at Thermopylae, that's where the Spartan 300 went up to meet that million-man force coming in from Xerxes and hold them for 3 days and valiantly sacrifice their life as martyrs to give the rest of the Greeks time to actually put together their forces in order to meet them at a later battle. He's basically saved all of Greece from being overcome, and Greece was the last outpost to keep Persia from wiping through what was at that time an unknown Europe. So in doing this, he said, "You know what, I'm tired of these guys doing this. We're going to take the battle to them." So he took his entire force, he marched them to what was called the Bosphorus, which is today modern-day Istanbul. Once upon a time, it was Byzantium during the Byzantine Empire. Prior to that, it was first set up as Constantinople by Roman Emperor of the East, or Eastern Roman Empire, Constantine. And at that point, this very incredible, it was coming out of the Black Sea into the Aegean Sea, and it was a crossroads there. He was one of the first engineering organizations to build a floating bridge. He took all of his cavalry, all of his forces over there without a navy. So one of the first people that had done that, he ended up moving into modern day Turkey, down into Syria, and every single opponent that came up against him, he didn't just beat them, he utterly destroyed them. But he first gave them an honorable option to surrender and to join and fall underneath his ranks and fall away from Persia. He even went down and attacked the walled and actually watered city called Tyre, Tyre, and it was, I think it was fabled at that time to be the actual impenetrable fortress, because it was not just a moat around them. It was a city, a walled fortress that was sitting out in like a bay. And so it took him over a year and a half with his engineers to build and actually cross the moat by building a bridge out there with his war machines, then to actually engage the city and to actually conquer it. So place after place, time and time again, he's now, 22, 23. He ends up conquering one city after another. Many of the other cities, when he rolls up to them, they just open their doors and fall underneath his rule, and he leaves a regent behind and a garrison to manage that organization, but he treated everybody fairly. He then first met Darius, which was the Persian emperor of the known world at the time. He fought him at, I believe it was the Battle of Issus, and at that particular battle, they had to come across a river and fight a force that was actually on the high ground on the other side of the river. He was able to use some incredible strategy and empower and inspire his hoplite warriors to beat a force that was highly trained, highly capable, and had destroyed everything else in their history because of how great they were. So this was no, part-time group of soldiers here. These were real warriors that were trained, and yet he beat them time and again. After Darius ran from that particular first combat environment, Alexander went further down. Now he's about 24. He actually invaded Egypt and actually came in there as a liberator because they did not resist. And he was actually crowned Pharaoh. So now about 25 years old, he's not only king or emperor of all Greece, he's taken over all of these cities on the eastern part of the Aegean. He's now Pharaoh of Egypt. And he actually left behind one of his generals there, Ptolemy. And that's where you see the Ptolemaic pharaohic line. It's not actually Egyptian, it's actually Greek. He left him there as one of his regents to manage that particular country. So then he rolled back and he went at age 26 and he met what was to be the ultimate battle. Darius had amassed the largest force in history to meet on the plains of Gaugamela, and that is modern day Babylon. And what they were decided to do is they were going to obliterate a 50,000 man force of what was Macedonian Macedon sheep herders, and they were going to finish them off and annihilate them once and for all and take back over all of the positions that Alexander had conquered. So Alexander comes up over the horizon with his generals and his hoplite soldiers, and what he sees is, this is what history, military journals tell us, that was something as large as a 1,000,000-man force that was from horizon to horizon, that was so large that anybody, even as brave as these warriors were, had to sit there and gulp. Oh my gosh, I mean, this is a 20-to-1 outnumber. Now, there are other people that say that's just impossible. That number has just grown and been embellished over time through people that were fans of Alexander and his wonderful, stories that he had. And so some people say, well, I think it was probably only 250,000. It wasn't 1,000,000, it was 250,000. So you got to think about this. Even at 250,000, they were 5-to-1 outnumbered. And these were all the best warriors. There was all the best battle elephants and everybody else that had been amassed from the Persian Empire. This was their best of the best. These were their special forces. These were their most highly trained professional warriors up against these 50,000 Greeks that had not been defeated in, I guess at that time, over 8, 9, 10 years. So, the night before the battle, the generals here at Parmenium and some of the other ones there are sitting there going, hey, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, we can back away right now, and we've already done more than most everybody else has. And Alexander responded, and he said, tomorrow when you look for me, look to the fore. And what he was meaning by that is, I will be on my black charger. And not only am I going to have my battle and my armor on, but he wore this purple flume. Purple was the color of royalty. And he basically climbed on top of his charger that was bigger and faster than all the rest of the cavalry. And he would be out on the spear tip of the vanguard, the front of the front. He was not sitting up on the side of the hill sending everybody else to go into battle. He was leading the charge. And he did, in fact. He actually went out there, and as he launched, the rest of his cavalry was having to beat their horses to make them keep up, because he was so far out in front of them, he was just going to be a target for every arrow and every javelin. So what he ended up doing is creating this entire interesting misdirection. He ran right side down the actual battle line, ended up going around and pulling a flanking maneuver, getting behind the battle line, ended up engaging Darius back at his command post. Darius ended up bolting again for the second time and ran, and they ended up still losing a number of their forces, but they beat this significant larger force, took out the Persian army, actually went to the capital that time of where Persia was seated at, and I don't remember what the capital was, but they took it over. And so now, at age 26, Alexander is emperor of the known world. He even went on after that for several other years to go in and conquer and go through much of Afghanistan and all the way into parts of India. So it was the largest empire that anyone had ever had, as to my knowledge. And it was all done by this very young man that had this very important seed of greatness put into him that rooted first and then blossomed, and taught him that one of the things that you do is, the other gift that was given to him by Aristotle was a very important book at the time. And the book was called the Iliad. And if you haven't read the Iliad by Homer, it is an extraordinary account of the 10-year Trojan War and outside of the city of Troy, and how all the Greeks had attacked the Trojans inside of their walled city. This went on for a long time, but you had incredible stories there of the actual Greek gods, Ares and Apollo and Poseidon and Athena, actually showing up on the battlefield right next to Hector and Achilles and Ajax and Odysseus. And you had this actually occurring, and you had people acting with these levels of honor and levels of bravery and courage. And when Aristotle had given this to him, not only did this affect him, he kept this under his pillow every night all the way until Alexander died at age 33. Why do you think he did that? It's because when you choose to be what you wish to seem, what you have done is you've chosen heroes and mentors and you have figured out the outcome of these individuals that have produced what you're looking to produce, and you figured out the attributes and the character traits, and you have basically taken them like pieces of a formula and you've stuck them inside of yourself, and you've continued to focus and do a thing called visual motor response, the visual motor rehearsal, and you continue to think about it over and over again so it becomes who you are from an inside. You change and basically morph how you see yourself, because this is who you are seeing yourself at a future time. So that is how you act, because you have set the standard. How you act, what are your morals, what are your ethics, what do you believe, and what do you stand for, and what do you stand against. These are things that are part and parcel of every individual that becomes noted, that becomes that level of greatness. Individuals that choose to be victors in life and refuse to be victims. They refuse to let the things that fate brings to them, testing them to see what they're made of, and instead of running from it and fearing it and acting cowardly, they turn back around and they bite back and they embrace it and they hang on to it. And then it might tear them up. They're going to get the t-shirt for it, but guess what? They're going to get the stripes, the rockers, and they're going to get the hash marks for the number of years of service that you refuse to quit. And that's where the grit actually comes in. That's what distinguishes you from everyone else. That is going to give you the opportunity to be that individual that is worthy, that lived a life that is meaningful, that is worthy of that stone that says in a legacy fashion that what you did was significant. So be as you wish to seem, write your own script, live your own role, and build your role out of individuals that have already done outlier level of performance. That in fact will allow you to do the same thing, and just make that, think about it, focus on it, and never give up. And I'll see you out there on the battlefield one day on the floor. Take care.